Okay, so good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bahujan Scholar Academic Writing Series. This is our second workshop on writing in a non-native language. My name is Bharat Rathod. I am Assistant Director of Office of Inclusion and Engagement at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I'm the founder of Bahujan Scholar, this group. Bahujan Scholar is a network of graduate students, faculty, and professionals from outside India. The goal of this network and our group is to support scholars from Bahujan communities, group and one-on-one mentoring, building networks, and promoting anti-caste research and activism, and organizing this kind of events on academic and professional development topics. Um, First of all, I would like to thank you, Nefli, my friend Nefli, because she planned this whole series and she connected us with Miranda. So, Nefli, thank you so much. Nef is here. Nef, you can say hi to everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Barat. I mean, it wouldn't be possible without you. It's collaborative work, and I'm very, very excited Miranda today talk
Okay.
about the things that she's going to talk about and share with.
I don't know, some technical issue. I don't know. Okay, so uh, I would now hand over to this session to my friend and moderator today, Dr. Neeraj Bunkar. So, Neeraj, please.
Hi. Hello. Can you hear me, brother? No. So hello everyone. As Bharat Rathod has already introduced this session and what actually they are doing, this platform is they're working on various topics, and I'm also that take this opportunity to thank him for creating this platform to help those who are not that in a position to support themselves and get that kind of guidance that they would be needed in their career prospects. So today we have a resource person with us, Miranda Lutians, if I pronounce right, uh, with us. So Miranda is a PhD candidate in composition and rhetoric at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she has taught college writing and first year seminars and now serves as the writing coordinator for the Office of Professional Development. She spent 15 years teaching high school language arts in Boston and Limba and also Peru. So her interest also includes enacting social justice pedagogy through student-led investigation of lingualism, free writing as an embodied and reflective practice, and contemplative composition. So this session would be around 40 to 45 minutes, Miranda, and then uh, I'm pretty much sure that everybody would that benefit from this session, and then we'll take some questions from the participants. So now its floor is all yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, um, Najir, Niraj, and Bharat, and Nef. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to everyone who is tuning in, whether it's late at night or early in the morning if you're out on the West Coast. And thank you for that introduction. So can everyone see my screen? Okay. Yeah, great. Okay. So I've subtitled today's talk, or I hope it can be a bit of a workshop. We'll have to see how things go. I've subtitled it Navigating the Delta, where authenticity and authority meet standard academic English expectations. And I've bolded authenticity and authority there because those are two terms that were highlighted by Dr. Karen Cardozo in her workshop, which ran recently, that was the first in this series. And I was not present, and I don't know how many of you were present for that talk. I watched it on YouTube, and I found it extremely valuable, informative. I was joking to Nef and Bharat, or not joking, but it's big shoes to fill to walk into where she left off. But I really loved her focus on the importance of keeping sort of authentic to yourself as much as possible. And also, so I think she left that talk with the main guidance of, remember that you are the author and authority. And so I too believe very much in those concepts that can be challenging, but are important to hold on to even during our darkest, most struggling moments as writers. But I also recognize, and that this is kind of this idea of this delta, where the river of authenticity and authority kind of flows into this huge ocean of standard academic expectations that we still have to acknowledge. We can't pretend that the ocean isn't there. So I'm going to use a lot of kind of water metaphors today. I really like using metaphors. And quickly, in terms of this visual, just you might be wondering what in the world this table is. Niraj mentioned that I am currently the writing coordinator at UMass's Office of Professional Development, which is an organization within UMass dedicated to supporting graduate students at our institution. And I run a weekly kind of drop-in, informal, and silent writing session called Shut Up and Write. I'm not sure how I feel about the title, but I inherited that title. And so I was hoping, as I stepped into this role just back in September, to kind of encourage accountability and kind of a sense of community, even though again, people, drop in, drop out, come and leave. And so one of the activities that I thought would be fun would be to have people kind of make what I call the talisman. So basically to take a string and cut it, and for each time they come to the session, whether they come for 20 minutes or 3 hours, they add a bead to this talisman. And so those envelopes that you see in the basket are where people have actually kind of are keeping their talisman and adding a bead every week. So I'm showing this partly because, as was mentioned, I used to teach high school, and even before that, I taught middle school. I really love to kind of embrace my former middle school teacher's persona of like making things kind of fun and tactile and kind of rewarding. Middle school students need a lot of rewards. So I wish each of you could have a bead right now. And if you were coming to your second session, I wish you were putting a second bead onto your talisman. But whether this is your first time, I welcome you here, and I look forward to where we're heading. All right, so I didn't know that a bio was going to be read about me, so I will just quickly run through this. I am, again, my specialization, I'm within the English department. I am within the field of composition and rhetoric, which can mean lots of things, but for me, it's basically kind of in more simple terms, kind of writing studies. I taught high school, and as I mentioned, also middle school in the Boston public schools, and then I also taught down in South America, in Lima, Peru, for 6 years. And I just thought I would mention, almost 20 years ago, I spent 1 month in New Delhi, thanks to a personal and professional friendship with a colleague I met during my first master's degree at the Harvard School of Education. And my friend had founded an organization in India to support educational development, and so he invited me over for a month in kind of a consulting role. But that was lovely and a very memorable journey for me. All right, I also wanted to just throw out a couple of caveats or disclaimers before we begin. One is that, although I do reference it kind of in the bio that was read, multilingual writing and kind of critical language awareness, that is not my focus area of research. That is not what I'm doing my dissertation on. But it is close to my heart, largely because of my my teaching background. And I have lived abroad. I actually lived in Russia over 20 years ago. And as I mentioned, I lived in Peru. At one point, I was fluent in Russian. I was actually a Russian history and literature major as an undergraduate. But I have never been a competent writer in any language other than English. So I like to kind of admit that as I go on to talk about writing in multiple languages, including your non-native language. All right, so our agenda for today is to first, I want to kind of dip our toes into what I'm calling some ocean scale concepts about multilingualism and writing. I want to kind of wade into the possible turbulent waters of writing in and for Western and non-Western academic contexts. And even I have those terms in quotes because, you know, I know there are lots of different ways to interpret some of the terms that will be used today. And then finally, and it'll depend how long we have together and how fast we go through this some of what I want to share. If we have time, I would love to invite people to kind of, as I say, splash around in a couple of writing support streams that I will be previewing, or at least just kind of introducing you to. But if we don't end up having time for people, or if people are not at their computer, if you're on your phone, or I do have a list of references and links at the end of my talk that I will be sharing with you. I'll be sharing these slides, so we may not have time to play around and splash too much, but at least you'll know what streams that you can continue to investigate after our time together today. I just wanted to start by acknowledging that there is a lot of humor and disdain and ridicule and poking fun at academic writing. This is a book from just last year, 2024. I actually have the hard copy at my office at UMass, so I don't have it with me, but I think this title says a lot: academic writing as if readers matter, implying that most academic writing is written as if readers do not matter. I really enjoyed this book. I haven't finished it yet, but the premise is that we often learn to write with one reader in mind, namely our instructor, our teacher, and we need to kind of and that teacher is paid to read what we write. And so he really encourages us to start to recognize that that is not the reality of the writing world, and he is questioning a lot of the norms and expectations and conventions of academic writing. 10 years prior to that, Steven Pinker, some of you may know, put it in even more explicit terms: why academic writing stinks and how to fix it. So I just thought that it's important, as we think through our own writing practices, to remember that academic writing comes with a lot of baggage, and there's been a lot of criticisms of how it has kind of grown into what it is and whether it really needs to be reconsidered. The other thing, I do not have the chat open, but if at any point you want to interrupt me, unmute, ask a question or put it in the chat, I will be happy to kind of pause as we go if there are questions or things that need more explaining. So I wanted to start again on this sort of ocean scale discussion of kind of language with a term that some of you may be familiar with. And again, my apologies if some of what I share with you today is very common knowledge to you already, but kind of trying to figure out what might be most useful to this audience. Translanguaging, and I'm going to share a definition, it's a relatively new concept. I was first introduced to it, and I actually have the book, The Translanguaging Classroom, when I was working at the American School in Lima, Peru. I had not heard, so that was about 10 years ago. I had not heard the term before. And what it really is it's a theory and kind of a framework for multilingual education pedagogy that moves away from the deficit model of communicating in a non-native language, where in the past, sort of having a secondary language was thought sometimes as a hindrance to becoming fluent and an efficient and effective communicator in another language. And this is really pushing back on that idea. So sorry for the long definition. I'm just going to read it out loud. I thought better to come from Ofelia Garcia. She's one of the co-authors. She's really kind of maybe the name most associated with this concept. So this is from her and a colleague at SUNY, New York. Translanguaging is a theoretical lens that offers a different view of bilingualism and multilingualism. The theory posits that rather than possessing two or more autonomous language systems, as has been traditionally thought, bilinguals, multilinguals, and indeed all users of language select and deploy particular features from a unitary linguistic repertoire to make meaning and to negotiate particular communicative contexts. Translanguaging also represents an approach to language pedagogy that affirms and leverages students' diverse and dynamic language practices in teaching and learning. So that is academic language in itself. I bolded the unitary linguistic repertoire. That is kind of a phrase you hear a lot when translanguaging is discussed. I probably should have also bolded affirms and leverages students' diverse and dynamic language practices, because again, that is really what translanguaging is about. So you don't sort of turn off the English channel and turn on the Spanish channel or the Hindi channel. You kind of allow those channels to kind of be working together. So Translanguaging is often, I think it's a more common term, and it's sort of utilized and has been embraced more perhaps in the elementary and secondary education level. But it certainly has relevance to, and it has been studied and theorized in higher education. I have just a few slides here, a few citations here, and they're all quite recent. This one's from a couple years back. This was, and these are qualitative studies. This was done in a Canadian school, a Canadian university, and it was really more about translanguaging sort of in receptive forms of language, in terms of reading and kind of and students being encouraged to, or sometimes not encouraged to, but experimenting with reading in their native language and sort of receiving language, doing more to be able to receive and process ideas that were coming at them as graduate students through their mother tongue, as opposed to the productive form, namely producing language and writing. This study, just from a year prior, is set in a Southeastern university, again, a qualitative study, kind of looking at the experiences of, in this case, Chinese graduate students. And it shows that on the one hand, students very much appreciated kinds of practices and pedagogies that promoted the idea of them brainstorming, sometimes even generating initial drafts in Chinese. But they also acknowledged to the researchers that there was still this sense of almost guilt in using their native language, and that they felt that they shouldn't need to use Chinese. And so there was a fair amount of ambivalence on their part. But again, it's an interesting, and again, I have these in my work cited, so you're welcome to look more closely at these if this is a concept you're interested in. Finally, this is kind of a meta-analysis of translanguaging strategies in writing classrooms, so again, specific to writing. But as I went through this, the focus was really on undergraduate experiences. There were very few graduate experiences. So I think that idea of translanguaging in the graduate student context is still relatively new, but it is out there. I would say that this idea of translanguaging, this is not just an international student issue. As I'm sure many of you are aware, there are many ways and different kinds of languages and forms of language that even domestic students in the United States bring to their higher education experiences, bring into college. It's hard to see, but this is kind of a joke, but this is a heat map of how people in the United States refer to what I would call a soda, and that's why it's red over here. Pop, soda pop. Pop is the more prolific term up in the Midwest and northern U.S. And then Coke, you just refer to a Coca-Cola down the South, even if you want a Sprite or something else. So that, of course, is a bit of a frivolous example of how people speak differently in America. But this is an issue that's been taken up quite seriously in my field, namely in composition and communication. This conference is my primary organization in the field of writing studies. And this document, which is very well known if you're in my field, called The Student's Right to Their Own Language. This was a resolution adopted in 1974, so over 50 years ago. And I just wanted to actually read it aloud. So again, this is a resolution by United States University scholars who decided that it was important to acknowledge that students have a right to their own language. So we affirm the students' right to their own patterns and varieties of language, the dialects of their nurture, or whatever dialects in which they find their own identity and style. Language scholars long ago denied that the myth of a standard American dialect has any validity. The claim that any one dialect is unacceptable amounts to an attempt at one social group to exert its dominance over another. Such a claim leads to false advice for speakers and writers and immoral advice for humans. A nation proud of its diverse heritage and its culture and racial variety will preserve its heritage of dialects. We affirm strongly that teachers must have the experience and training that will enable them to respect diversity and uphold the right of students to their own language. In a way, it's hard for me to read that statement right now in 2025, when I'm afraid that much of the power of this statement is being attempted to be chipped away at in our country. And I know Dr. Cordoza couldn't help also, but at least allude to our current political moment in the US, and particularly in higher education. But I think it's all the more important that we recognize that this statement came out 50 years ago. And it has been since reaffirmed. It was reaffirmed in 2003, in 2006, and 2014. And I think it's probably due yet again a reaffirmation, as I said, at this particular moment in time. So I'm sharing this with you partly to help you recognize that, again, within my field, we talk about these ideas. You may have heard code switching. There's now even, that has been sort of in a way pushed back to instead embrace the term code meshing. And I promise we're getting back into the international context in a moment, but Vershawn Ashanti Young is a scholar, and he wrote, or he is a co-author or co-editor, I should say, of this book called Other People's English, Code Meshing, Code Switching, and African American Literacy. These are just two different editions, two different covers. I think they both have their power to them visually. And again, code meshing is the idea that really we want to be thinking about meshing language together. And when one talks about switching, again, kind of like that idea of like turning off the English channel, turning on the Spanish channel, that still privileges those in power. It still puts the onus on the person who has to do the switching, to negotiate, to navigate, to decide the appropriateness of certain languages. And so this has been a real movement within my field to question academic expectations quite emphatically. And this is an article that Young wrote. He wrote it, 15 years ago. I have used this with my students in a class called Writing, Identity, and Power that I teach to first-year students at UMass. And this article that he wrote called "Should Writers Use They Own Language?" And the entire piece is written in African American vernacular English. However, as we see here, it is, a scholarly journal. It's a very scholarly piece. He's pushing it back against other assumptions and other writers, but he's doing it all in African American vernacular English. And so that, for my students, many of whom have come from a very monolingual context, is kind of a fascinating piece. We also really discussed how realistic is this? Can we push the boundaries this hard? So I'm giving you this context just to understand that this idea of native language and native tongue is really an expansive one, and I think it's a really exciting one, and it's raised a lot of questions in my field and beyond. So heading back to, as I said, the international context, and this is kind of the turbulent waters part, because I wanted to just briefly touch on some issues that do come up in writing scholarship and anthropology, ethnography, linguistics, that has to do really with kind of cultural difference and variations in rhetorical approaches and audience expectations. And I found this article, which is, I don't actually have the date here. It's in the Works Cited. I think it's relatively recent. And it stood out to me because I loved, again, as I said, I love metaphors, and this was the Bermuda Triangle of academic writing. And so I was curious as to where these authors were going to take that concept from the title. And this is from the abstract. This study investigates how non-Anglo-Saxon doctoral students transform and develop their academic writing skills during PhD studies in an Anglo-Saxon context. The findings reveal the struggles of these doctoral students expressed through the metaphor of the Bermuda Triangle of academic writing, an allusion to the navigationally challenging area where ships and planes used to inexplicably crash and disappear. And so I don't know if everyone is familiar with that term and sort of the metaphor of a Bermuda Triangle. that is kind of the actual geographic location with a illustration of a ship being about to be undone. And I actually found this graphic in a Newsweek article that says, from just 2 years ago, that says, do weird things still happen in the Bermuda Triangle? So that's a whole nother question. But this idea of these graduate students who felt that these were Eastern European graduate students, so again, non-Anglo-Saxon, kind of moving and studying in a Norwegian school university, and that idea of feeling kind of lost and churned up by their experiences in a very different kind of cultural academic environment when it comes to their writing. When I read Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, I actually thought that it possibly was an allusion to a sort of triangular graphic. And what I mean by that is the idea of there being sort of different approaches to academic writing, particularly in terms of how articles, theses, dissertations are structured, and how arguments are structured. And there, again, and my concern here is that I do not want to be making generalizations, certainly not cultural generalizations, but there is a fair amount in the literature discussions of how in non-Western academic writing or contexts, often it involves more of an inductive model of building towards an argument, starting with observations, kind of moving into patterns, into a tentative hypothesis, and then ending, kind of concluding a piece with the theory, like what is the thesis, what is the argument. In Western academic writing, that tends to be inverted. And in Western academic writing, the expectation is that you begin with the theory. You make it explicit from the start, and you then explain kind of how that theory originated with a tentative hypothesis, and there's patterns and the observations that then allowed that theory to be arrived at. But it is definitely a very different way of structuring the development of an argument. Another term, and I've sort of asked around, this is not a concept that I was until recently familiar with. And so if anyone has more information or anything they wanted to add, but on this concept, it's an anthropological concept of high context versus low context communication styles. It was developed by an American anthropologist back in the 70s named Edward Hall. And again, this is me paraphrasing, but high context cultures, which tend to be sort of non-Western cultures or global South cultures, although obviously, again, geography is not binary in that way. But high context are cultures that rely more on shared cultural knowledge, sort of unspoken rules and understandings, and partly as a result of strong social cohesion. So there's a lot of kind of assumed context when writing, and therefore kind of often a lack of direct reference or explicit ideas being stated. In contrast, low context cultures, they rely more on direct instruction, explicit articulation of ideas and information, minimal assumptions regarding background knowledge, and in contrast, again, kind of more of a focus on the individual, less on the social group. And this, again, I think relates to those pyramids, those triangles that I showed, that idea of a more inductive approach, where you may not get to the thesis in a way because there are certain assumptions and kind of the context already exists around some of what's being discussed, as opposed to the more deductive Western model of stating that thesis explicitly right up front. There's no questioning, and then supporting that thesis down below. Obviously, or I should say not surprisingly, this half-century-old concept has been critiqued as overly simplistic, essentialist, certainly reliant on binaries. Again, I am not an expert in this theory at all, but I do think it's still maybe worth considering in relation to sort of differences in norms and conventions in academic writing across cultures and languages. All right, I'm going to talk about two more things relating to kind of now really expectations, sort of in standard academic kind of Western English. And one of those expectations for academic writing is clarity. And again, that is not to say that that is not an expectation elsewhere, but certainly in academic writing, clarity is key. It's kind of one of the golden rings you're reaching for. And again, as I've mentioned, part of that clarity, or at least the assumption of clarity, a way to achieve clarity, support clarity, is by having that thesis stated in an introduction, having each paragraph start with a topic sentence so that there's a real sense of the purpose and how each paragraph or section is functioning. Explicit signposting kind of along the way, so that you're really kind of almost directing the traffic and where the reader is heading, and the reader gets a clear sense of kind of the map. That was my attempt. This looks actually kind of confusing over here, but the idea of going into a bay, you need to have a sense of where you go, so you won't crash into a rock or into another boat. So that idea of sort of signposting. And along with one form of signposting is clear transitions, and kind of helping the reader understand the movement from one paragraph and or one section of your writing to the next. Oops, sorry, that X shouldn't be there quite yet. But the second primary expectation of standard American academic English is concision. That idea of actually avoiding over-reliance on long sentences. We tend to think of academic writing as extremely long sentences, but more and more it's been proven that that does not serve concise and effective writing. Same with big words. There's always an assumption that the bigger the word, the better, but that is not certainly the case, and it's not always worth going just for the biggest word to sound more formal or erudite. Instead, really the goal in strong academic writing is explaining complex concepts as efficiently as possible. And so I was trying to stick with my water metaphors, and academic writing should not be like a fire hose, just spewing everything out and sending long streams of water. It should really be like offering a good hydrating 8-ounce glass of water to your reader, and not offering a massive deluge, because the reader doesn't want that. They want that good, satisfying glass of water that you're there to provide. All right, I wanted to now shift into talking about some actual tools and some strategies. I'm wondering maybe though at this point, if this is a good time, are there, I haven't been checking in the chat. Okay. Yeah, I don't see any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Would anyone like to unmute or to throw something into the chat at this point? I'm going to take a sip of my water.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we do not have any questions at this point, but at the end we'll take if we'll have.
Okay, sounds great. All right, thank you. All right, so how do we work toward achieving clarity and concision in our written expression? And where can we get support in making the moves that matter in academic writing? I am not going to offer you a miracle cure of any kind, but I did want to share, as I said, a few kind of tools that that hopefully you will find some benefit from. When I put moves that matter in academic writing, partly because I am a big fan of this book. I have my copy right here. This is a book I've used with high school students, writing with my college first-year writing students. It is really a book geared towards undergraduates. I was first introduced to it by someone who worked primarily with international students in the university context, and found it extremely useful. I think it's good for everyone. It's one of those universal design kinds of books. And it is literally, it's called They Say, I Say, The Moves That Matter in Academic Writing. It is really about theoretically, it's about seeing academic writing as a conversation. And that I'm not going to get any further into, but it is also well known. And the 6th edition came out 2 years ago, and it's only, the first edition was 2004, so it puts out new editions quite frequently. It has been critiqued as well as lauded for another key feature, which is that it offers all kinds of templates. The authors make the argument right up front that no templates are not plagiarism, and no templates are not the antithesis of creativity. That the words and the phrases that are being offered are not squelching creativity. They're in fact acting as kind of scaffolding for people and writers who are not comfortable quite yet with academic writing to make these moves in a more efficient, articulate way, but really keep their own ideas moving the conversation forward. So this is just an example of one of the kind of categories or the types of templates that they offer. And I have had students, again, for 15 years, high school, college, use this in, I think, very effective and kind of productive ways. So I'm generally a fan. I'm always open to critiques and criticisms of templates and other things. But so I'm showing you this partly because whereas I've been familiar with this book for a very long time, I just recently, like this summer, became familiar with what I'm seeing as like the graduate student version of this book, although and luckily it's an internet resource. And it's coming out of the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom. And it's called the Manchester Academic Phrasebank. I have a screenshot here. And what I thought I'd do is, I think it's maybe gonna, well, what I thought I'd do is I will quickly kind of explain. Again, I did use this. I used it in writing a grant proposal a couple months ago where I was exhausted, flailing, needing to finish and write a conclusion. And I came to this data bank. And as you can see along the top, they have sort of two axes here. Along the top are basically different moves you must make in academic writing that somewhat chronologically, obviously, introducing kind of the lit review, methodology, results, findings, and writing conclusions. And what follows, and I will get out of my slideshow in a minute and actually get onto the website. And if any of you are able to open up another tab and want to look for yourself, that's fine. It offers a whole bunch of templates. And along this side, the sort of the y-axis, are more sort of general moves that we need to make that you might be making in any section of a piece of writing, of an article or a dissertation. And it provides language for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here. And so as I just mentioned, I was like really tired. I just needed some language to kind of help me and jumpstart me to get this conclusion written. And so when I clicked on writing conclusions, you first of all get a nice little kind of summary of what a conclusion is. I think most of us assume we know that, but a little refresher, kind of reminder never hurts. And then down below, and these are expandable and collapsing views. It literally just like sort of templates, although in this case it's kind of sentence starters. It gives you language to literally start off your sentences and then go on to what did your study set out to do. Sometimes it actually has a little box like this where it just sets out to, and then it's giving you lots of really nice verbs. And that's another thing that we sometimes tend to rely. We kind of get stuck in our own verb choice. Develop. A lot of people use develop a lot. But here are a whole bunch of wonderful verbs that are helping us, and you could interchange some of these, just kind of get that sentence going. And none of these would be ever considered plagiarism. They are so highly used. And the scholar who developed this, did basically I'm forgetting the term right now, but a corpus analysis and drew language from all over the scholarly universe to make these. So these are phrases that are used so often that it would never be considered to take this and as long as what you're filling in is original, it's your work, that's fine. So I think maybe what I'll do, and so over here, as I mentioned, and I talked about transitions a little earlier. So if you click here down signaling transitions, which again is a move that, that we have to make throughout our paper, signaling contrasts. Throughout our writing, we're always needing to make transitions. Here again, we get all of these sort of sentence starters that I think can just, again, be useful to help us put something on the page sometimes, or to, again, to vary our language, or to sometimes even think a little bit differently about what maybe you really want to be doing in a transition. And some of this language, I think, can even sort of spark new ideas or new possibilities for you as a writer. So again, if this link is in my Works Cited or my bibliography, I should say, you just can Google Manchester Phrasebank. It's going to come up. It's totally free. You don't have to have an account or a sign in or anything, which I always love these days. So I would encourage you, on your own time to take a look around, see if there's some things here that you could bookmark or just kind of come back to, and know that at whatever stage you are in writing a piece, and whatever kind of the move you need to make, there's probably some language here that could be helpful. All right, I'm going to go back to my slideshow. And so what I wanted to now sort of recognize is the elephant in the classroom, or as we say, the elephant in the room, and that would be using generative AI as a writing tool, support, coach, alter ego, therapist. What else is there? My son, just this morning, I have a 15-year-old son, he said, "Did you hear ChatGPT is making a browser?" And I thought, why do they need a browser? And he started to tell me all the reasons, all the things you can now do. Luckily, he's skeptical. I'm glad to have a 15-year-old skeptic, probably thanks to me. So I am not a total skeptic of generative AI at all. And I will not, we could have a series on AI, clearly. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I felt I had to acknowledge it when we're thinking about, how do we write these days, regardless of your multilingual status or monolingual status. What I wanted to acknowledge, first of all, because a lot of people just say AI and they mean generative AI. I mean, AI has been around for a long, long time. It was around with Microsoft Word and the little clippy guy who would come out and ask if you wanted to maybe change the spelling on something. We've had spell check. We've had all kinds of tools to help us for a long time. And that's all artificial intelligence. There isn't some little proofreader sitting behind your computer. And so prior to generative AI with the release of ChatGPT in 2022, prior to that, a lot of us were using AI. And one program or service, I guess I should say, that I've been using for quite a while. I use it with, again, high school students. I even convinced my rather wealthy international school in Lima to buy the premium version so students could try out premium Grammarly. I don't have premium. I just use the free version. But I have been with Grammarly for a long time. And of course, now there's so many ads on YouTube for Grammarly. So I'm not paid by them. Like, I have no affiliation. But I think through the whole generative AI and ChatGPT and Claude and all the others, I've kind of continued to try to keep up my relationship, I guess, with Grammarly. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with Grammarly, use it. The free version is quite powerful in itself, and it integrates with so many different programs. I use Google Docs a lot. I definitely owe my something to the Google suite, for better or for worse. But I've used Google a lot, so I tend to default to Google Docs. And so again, apologies if many of you you may be more advanced Grammarly users than I am, but I just thought I would show you a few things that I think can be useful when, again, trying to get to the more granular level now, as I'm talking about. We've moved kind of from the big macro thoughts about translanguaging down to the very specifics. But Grammarly has some nice features. Again, this is a screenshot, and so I do have I don't have a link to the document on the left. The document on the left is a running meeting agenda between me and my advisor. It's basically where I just keep track of, I create an agenda and I keep track of what we talk about when we meet. And so it's a very informal document. I don't proofread for my advisor, not when I'm making an agenda for a meeting. So I thought it might be kind of a useful thing to just to open up Grammarly. What Grammarly offers is, the only thing it offers for free is kind of correctness, and which are really, again, very surface level issues. But Grammarly is constantly catching me on my comma usage. And so what I wanted to show, it shows you all the things that it is kind of questioning, and they're aligned with these proofreading marks over here, these red marks. And once you kind of start to explore a little bit, like that comma that it had noted that I needed, that I don't have in my original here, I don't have a comma before the but here. If you click on the little info button, it actually gives you kind of a mini lesson in that convention. Now, it's the same lesson over and over again. Every time you misuse a comma, it's going to give you the same example. So it's not something that's catered specifically to the error you've made. But I think it's sometimes actually, it's a good little just overview of the particular convention, error, or suggestion that it's making. One thing I wanted to also point out about Grammarly is that when it comes to understanding things at a deeper level, I think they have a really good blog. And under the blog, there's language rules, and there's all kinds of different, again, kind of permutations and different topics and concepts. And I think they do a pretty good job. I've, of course, had all kinds of both hard copy and online grammar tools and such that I've suggested to students. But these days, the Grammarly blog is kind of where I suggest students go for for lessons and sort of for explanations of some of the errors that they are continuing to make. Comma splice is one that comes up a lot. So I just wanted to also make you aware that if you even just Google Grammarly blog and you put in whatever concept, term, problem, error, issue, you're likely to get a pretty good explanation.
Hello, Miranda. Sorry to interrupt you, but we are running out of time. We have 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. My apologies. Okay. So I also just wanted to quickly, as I've been showing, most of what I've been showing you so far about Grammarly is purely just it's been offering for a long time. Now, with the arrival of generative AI, it has obviously gotten into the game, because I think it knows it would perish if it didn't get into the generative piece. And so now what you can do, and it's similar, obviously, to kind of a ChatGPT, but if you can just highlight a piece of text, and it then will give you options to make something more scholarly or more, let's see, that I'm just showing you, and this is linked as well, so if you're interested in looking, I took that paragraph from, again, these agenda notes, and Grammarly offered to make it sound more academic, sound more professional, and sound more formal. And these are 3 different versions of my original, and I will speak to those different versions in just a moment. So let me get back to this, and oh yes, so here, yeah. So this is what I asked them. This is what Grammarly offered. You can also, like ChatGPT, you can ask for something specific for it to do. And I would just say I don't use that. I have not used that before, that feature. I can't speak to its ability to kind of transform or adapt or revise writing in the same ways that Claude or ChatGPT do. But what I like in a way is that you stay within the document. ChatGPT still is kind of this bot conversation. This feels to me much less like a conversation and more like an advisor or a coach sitting next to you, you have an issue with a couple of sentences. How can we work on those 2 sentences or that paragraph together? So again, to me, it seems a little bit more of a, I don't know, it's not human, but it has a little bit more of the human feeling. Finally, I just wanted to mention you can turn off the sharing function when using AI, so that I've turned off the product improvement and training. So basically, any writing that Grammarly is using, it's not, as I say, kind of feeding the huge monster and going out there into the web to be scraped and messed with. All right, so this is my last slide. And I started with this sort of river delta metaphor for writing in your non-native language. And so what I wanted to kind of leave you with is this idea of encouraging you back to this idea of authenticity and authority, not letting yourself, as you kind of reach that delta, get swept away. So if you're coming down the river, your language, your comfort, your context, don't get swept out into the ocean of standard academic English. Instead, and this is actually, I found this is the delta of the Ganges, and how beautiful it is, how many things there are to kind of observe and appreciate. And so I think my plea to you would be to kind of, as much as possible, be curious, metaphorically divert a flow of water and see what happens, dig around in the messy mud. And so, what I would say, we don't have time to do it, but this kind of rewriting and generative AI work, I think can have benefits. It has benefits when you spend the time to actually compare versions and to start to think, what is the difference between, diving deeper versus delving versus the fact that this is already claiming that I've engaged in an extensive review, which I really haven't. All I said was it got me reading more with the well-being literature. So see what suggestions are made and use that to broaden your horizons and to allow yourself, I guess, to kind of move into the ocean in colorful and creative and authentic ways. I'm done. And my apologies for going this long.
Thank you, Miranda, for this insightful and thought-provoking session. And actually, you have given us a lot of things to reflect on. And it is not just about writing, but also about how language and culture and identity all shape the way we express knowledge. And I just want to mention that the special thing that stood out in today's session was that writing in a non-native language is not just about a technical challenge, but it's also about that an act of negotiation. So we navigate rhetorical expectations, sometimes unspoken academic norms, and also even power dynamics, uh, which builds into standard English. So you also helped us to see that these are not just shortcomings, but also opportunities and also ways to expand the academic conversation rather than string ourselves in it. Uh, I especially appreciated the discussion on translanguaging, the idea that bilingual and multilingual writers draw from one flexible linguistic repertoire, and rather than switching between separate systems. So that perspective actually challenged the old deficit model and instead recognize multilingual writers as resourceful, dynamic communicators.
Yeah.
So yeah, this session really highlighted how writing traditions differ across cultures. The inductive style that you have mentioned, seen in non-Western traditions versus also the deductive style, typical of Western academia. So this sort of understanding these patterns helps us to become more conscious writers and also able to adapt our voice without losing our identity. So I think your point about students' rights to their own language which you have said with us, that captures the heart of this entire conversation, that clarity and confidence in academic writing should never come at the expense of the authenticity. And the important tools that you have said, this particularly the academic phrase bank, which I think will be very helpful for those who want to just that write in the academic style, but they do sometimes they do not find the appropriate, the format, the language, the signpost,
Yeah.
So yeah, and the grammarly, of course. So so there are so many insightful inputs that you have given.
Well,
So
that was, I believe, more eloquent, Niraj, than my entire talk. So you did a lovely job summarizing what I just rambled through for an hour. But thank you so much. Yes, and I would say, I guess, that I probably, speaking of transitions, I probably needed a stronger transition between this idea of translanguaging and the ways that we do need to harness and the assets that multilingualism brings to the writer, transitioning over to then the reality that there are still certain expectations, there are still pressures, and that a multilingual writer writing in your non-native language is an extremely challenging act. And so the idea of the Grammarly, the word bank, which again is useful to all writers, but I think is meant to be a tool that, as we hopefully move to a more enlightened place in academia and academic writing, that we still need tools to kind of to keep us afloat. So that was my idea, in trying to splice together in some ways these two slightly mismatched halves of the talk. But I hope the tools were useful, as well as the more broader theoretical frameworks that I believe in strongly.
Needed the announce feedback form, please announce.
yes, yeah. So actually, Bharat has said a feedback form in the chat box. So those who have joined today, please feel free to fill up and send your feedbacks. Thank you. And yeah, if you have any question, feel free to write in the chat box. If you comfortable, you can put on your video and audio on so we can hear you.
I
Your
think
question.
there is one question from Vinod.
Yeah. Vinod, okay. I will read it out. Yeah. So he's asking about like to use the generative option in Grammarly will be ethical or not. So it is about the ethical questions, whether we should use generative options or not.
There are so many unknowns and lack of clarity within institutions, across institutions, about kind of what is acceptable or what is allowed. There is, and even Grammarly has, it allows you to cite if you use generative, the generative feature. It then even gives you an option to cite that. I think that, at least from my teaching of undergraduates, I haven't taught graduate students. I support them, but I haven't actually taught them. We often spend some time kind of experimenting a little bit with AI and with the generative feature. Never from scratch. I think the big no-no, of course, is to just put in a prompt and ask Grammarly or ChatGPT or something to write it for you. And again, that's why I like having Grammarly there kind of on the side, so that you're really working with something you have already produced and you're looking to see if there's ways to improve it. And I have had students do that. And I think what's really key is that you get to the metacognitive place where you don't just, as in always the case with Grammarly, you never just blindly and kind of, without any critical thinking, accept their suggestions. I've been saying that for years. Maybe there shouldn't be a comma there, and you did the right thing, and Grammarly is not understanding what you're trying to achieve. So just like the small things, if you have Grammarly or anything else, ChatGPT, rewrite something for you or revise something for you, the more time you can spend, and I recognize time is of the essence, but really comparing, as I said, sort of being curious about how it's changed things, why it might be changing those things, what the implications of those changes and revisions are. I think that can be a really productive and useful activity. And you may not end up actually using what it suggests, but if you're concerned about using suggested and revised language, I would really, again, talk to whoever is your audience or whoever is kind of you're working with, your institution, a publisher. I mean, journals these days have all kinds of different both guidance and kind of rules around AI. So I don't want to speak to the kind of almost the legality of it. I'm just thinking more of it as kind of a learning tool and a way to help broaden and kind of open your eyes to different options, to different ways of articulating your ideas.
Yeah, I think there is another questions from the chat. Please suggest some books on academic writing, other than they say, I say.
Okay. I mean, there's Dr. Cardoza in the first session said the same thing. I mean, there's so many books out there, and it's hard to say because most books these days have kind of a particular angle or focus to them. But I'm trying to think right now where let me add a little bit to my, I can provide that as a resource. There are lists out there and sort of bibliographies of good academic writing. And I would say a lot of them, they may not necessarily be just books too. A lot, again, there are kind of resources, websites, databases, things like that. And again, the Grammarly blog has a whole thing on academic writing too. So. The elements of academic style. So that's that one I'm actually, is that a take on the elements of style, which is what I have. So anyway. Great. How to argue.
George, okay.
Okay.
Is there any questions?
I think there is question from Dildar.
How to argue by, he's also, I think, suggesting one book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have a sort of go-to list that I'm aware of that I could just put in the chat. And thank you to someone who put the Manchester database in the chat. I meant to do that, but someone found that. The craft, yeah. I will look. I'm sure there is a good, I'm just not being able to pull right now off the top of my head a singular place that kind of amalgamates all of these, but I'm sure, but I will look for one. We probably have some things at the Office of Professional Development as well. And graduate student writing is its own. Actually, I mean, and then the other thing is, there is the writing that one produces, the thing, and then there is sort of the process of writing, and there's so much. This is another book that I've been enjoying called Write No Matter What. And it's really, Bharat, you've seen it before? Yeah. So the idea of not just what we write, but kind of how we get it written, I think in some ways is something I've been exploring more recently. So, but let me look for kind of a bibliography of in its own right, and I will definitely. I need to do that for myself, and I will get that out to you all.
If anyone has a question, please raise your hand and you can directly ask question to Miranda. Please feel free. No question is stupid question or irrelevant. Please ask question. Feel free.
as a teacher, I'm a big fan of wait time, which is that awkward thing of, not just calling on the first person to put their hand up, who always puts their hand up, but waiting and letting other people, and students hate it because you sit there in silence and it's awkward, but I'm happy to employ wait time right now. I have nowhere to be right now, but I know you're all busy. So, but if anyone has anything, any little question, anything, and please do fill out the feedback form. That will be something that Brad and Niraj will share with me, and I would be really interested in. And I think one of the questions is there anything else I can provide you as a follow-up? I'd be more than happy. This is really what I do these days. So.
And the feedback is also very important for us in terms of like what kind of program or what kind of topic we should cover, and how we can improve, because I know that there is a lot of scope to improve and coordination and so on. So your feedback will be really, really very important for us.
Okay. Well, I thought I'm going to stop sharing, but I wanted to show that I do have my bibliography. And
Yeah, I think we do not have any questions, but if
okay.
anybody has any question, then they can definitely reach out to us and we will share questions to Miranda and we'll get back to you as well.
I think
I
there
think,
is a
yeah.
question, Neeraj.
Oh,
Okay. Okay.
oh, that's a great
So,
question. Yeah.
Dildas, yeah, I never thought it that way. The non-Western way of academic writing and Western way of academic writing, deductive and inductive. Thank you so much. Okay. So, and then the Pallavi is asking how to integrate narratives in academic writing.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love that. And I think that despite Steven Pinker thinking that academic writing stinks, I think one thing that in the decade plus that since he wrote that, at least in the humanities and social sciences, I know I'm not sure what all your fields are. I think within the natural sciences and maybe sort of business and other, or maybe business, I'm not sure, but within humanities and social sciences, there's been a lot more acceptance and even encouragement of including narratives, of using the first person, singular even, not just we. So, I mean, integrating narratives, I think it would really, how you do that would very much depend on both your audience. It would depend on what roles those narratives are playing. I'm assuming maybe they are using in sociology. Yeah, maybe you're using those narratives to extend and sort of to help immerse. I mean, if I actually work with, I do freelance work, and I have a graduate student. She's South Korean in sociology. I've been working with her for 2 years on her dissertation. She uses a lot of narratives sort of embedded within. She's an ethnographer or has done ethnographic research, obviously to help her readers really understand the experiences of these migrant workers that she is portraying in South Korea, their experiences with legal ramifications and issues with employers. She uses those a lot, and she herself, I mean, she was there, so she was not just carrying out interviews, but also embedded, and sort of embedded herself in the field, as they say, or in her situation and her context. So she uses those really as sort of for illustrative purposes. Her dissertation does not start out as a narrative. She doesn't use an introduction, but sometimes a narrative can be a fascinating and extremely effective way to begin a piece of writing. And again, that is more and more acceptable to do. I mean, having worked with all the way back to middle schoolers, I mean, we're always talking about the hook, how to get your reader engaged, how to get them excited, how to make them, that idea of in medias res, that term, Latin term for like in the middle of things, like getting someone into a scene, into a context, having sensory feeling. So how you do it and where you do it, I can't really answer that specifically, but thank you so much for asking that question, because I think that increasingly is a move that we can make and we should make in our academic writing.
Okay. I think, yeah, there's another observation and kind of a question from Nidhi Singh. She's asking, it's not a question, but just wanted to share that she found the terms code switching and meshing interesting and would love to receive material on it relevant for early childhood teaching learning tools.
Okay, yeah. Well, I do have a couple of links to do, or at least one to do with code meshing, which again is that Versana Shanti Young, that's kind of hit. I think he kind of claims ownership of that term. I'm not quite sure. He's written about it a lot, and yeah, I can definitely include some more. I've used that a lot with my first year, my writing students, talking about language and identity, and how code switching is a term that's kind of thrown around a lot, and it generally has had positive connotations, like I'm a proficient code switcher, but he, along with other academics, started to again kind of question the power implications of that term, and that idea of meshing, and again of uniting and not seeing language as autonomous, and instead as something that you kind of weave together. And it's not on me to decide when I should be using one of my forms of languages or another. It's my opportunity to kind of bring both in particular situations and mesh them together. So I'm not sure that I'll be able to find specifically to early childhood, but I think that reading more about the concept of code meshing would be a very transferable thing to kind of any educational context. Hi,
Yeah,
Suparna.
Yeah. Hi, Miranda. That was a wonderful presentation, and I really learned a lot from this because right now I'm writing my dissertation, and my area is also interdisciplinary. So I just had a question. Like I was observing different different papers, some from history, some from sociology, and I'm a PhD student in English. But since my area is Dalit literature, so I'm reading on historical sources, sociological as well as literature. So I find there's a lot of difference in writing. So when literature students or literature scholars are writing, as well as philosophy. So there's a lot of more complex structure, right? Complex sentence structure and words and terminology. And when you get into the sociology papers and history papers, they are quite simple, quite direct. I feel more scientific somehow, the social sciences. So how do I as a student or as a writer navigate between the two? Because like you said, and you very correctly mentioned that it has to be very concise and clarity is more important over complexity, right?
Yeah.
But somehow when I see the publications, the PMLA and all, they generally, I think, encourage more of complex writing, or am I wrong? That's what I had a question. I just wanted to share my doubt with you. And
yeah, well, thank you so much, Suparna. I actually I know I don't know if Neff is still here. Nefeli, she may have left, but I know her because I came into UMass in comparative literature, and I quickly recognized that I was probably better suited elsewhere, namely like I have more of an education background, so I'm not in education, but composition and rhetoric is is also very multidisciplinary. It pulls from linguistics and education and all that. So I kind of found my place and my home and my people. And I was just talk about like the Bermuda Triangle. I felt like my first semester of reading comparative literature scholarship, I was in a Bermuda Triangle and I was drowning constantly. Largely because, not just the quantity that was required of us in terms of reading for seminars, but really how it was written. So I hear you on those differences. I cannot speak to the current kind of expectations of someone like PMLA, and kind of what, whether they have sort of a rubric of like sentence structure that they're looking for. I can't imagine that they do. I think my assumption is that there is still, it's just kind of hanging on there, that expectation of complex compound sentences, one after another, with obviously extremely challenging terminology, woven all within. And I can't help but believe that, you writing in a way that borrows from and sort of pays homage to perhaps more of the history and the sociology and that clarity, if not scientific, but at least that sort of, sense of being kind to the reader. I mean, I'll go back to that slide with like, as if the readers mattered. I mean, we don't enjoy reading things like that. At least I don't. And I think if you claim you do, then God bless you. But I think that idea, and same with Pinker, we just, it was just the norm, and kind of that way, the gatekeeping, all of those things, that were just in place for so long. And I would really like to think that we're kind of moving beyond that, but so much of it still lingers. So I think
the public intellectual is filling that gap. The public intellectual, the idea of their writing style is quite, they're filling the gap and the sweet spot between complex and simple.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, no, well, good luck to you. Good luck in that.
Thank you. Same to you.
See, wait time works. You just wait a little bit, and then finally people start. Scientifically proven.
So we can wait for 5 more minutes so that.
Yeah, so fine, I guess.
Yeah, Miranda, I had one more question. So when I'm writing for an American journal, let's say, so it should be which you mentioned, the deductive style of writing, right? So okay. So the theory and then the hypothesis and
okay. Usually sort of by, I mean, I also think, abstracts, obviously have to include the thesis and the findings and all that. So abstracts in a way kind of almost undo that question, but definitely having kind of your thesis sort of by the, clear to your reader by the end of your introduction. So if your introduction starts in a narrative form, or it starts, with an anecdote, or it starts with reference to an existing theory or scholarship, all that's fine, but by the end of the introduction.
By the end.
Even
in conference papers, right?
Yeah.
Similar thing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
I've been doing that, so I was just worried whether I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. And again, I mean, there's no right or wrong. I actually, in reading more about, because again, I was not familiar with the high culture and kind of low culture concepts, and so I was trying to find scholarship within my own field, fell flat. One of my very good friends, also a friend with Neff, who is also in comparative literature, and she's in translation studies. She's from China, and I asked her because I thought she might know about it, especially given, translation and interpreting. She had never heard of it, but she went and found a recent article in Chinese that referenced it. So who knows? But in doing a little bit of digging around, I found an interesting article on web design, kind of in the global era, and it was making the point that although there's no right or wrong, kind of low culture web text produced in low culture societies Sorry, not low culture. That's the wrong word.
Low context. Yeah.
Sorry. I don't want to call any society low culture. Low context cultures or societies. That those web texts, those websites, and tended to be more effective and get kind of higher traffic and all that because they didn't make assumptions, because they kind of it was almost that like lowest common denominator or kind of level playing field. And so if we're thinking of putting a thesis up first as in a way a form of like low context, in that like you don't want to assume that someone's going to sort of infer my thesis as we go along here, I guess it's similar. I mean, it's sort of that idea that if you're moving across different readerships and across different cultures and contexts, then letting someone know up front may be the kinder thing, not kinder, but just the more practical thing to do.
Yeah. Because of the limited attention span also. So it's better that you just say that. Yep. Yeah.
So I think it's time to wrap up, and then because I don't see any questions now.
Great.
So I hope we leave with this takeaway that writing in a non-native language is not about erasing where we come from, but also, that adding new dimensions to how we think and how we communicate. So thank you again, Miranda, for leading this deeply engaging session. And thank you for everyone who joined us and contributed today.
Well, thank you.
I also want to add that if you would like to know more about, learn more about the Bahujan scholars or upcoming writing workshops like this, please check out our website and feel free to reach out.
Well, thank you again so much for inviting me and for kind of welcoming me into your community. I wish everyone well with your scholarship, with your adventures in writing, in communicating, and in learning from one another. So thank you again so much, and I would love to follow up or be helpful in any way. So please, let's stay in touch.
And please don't forget to give your feedback, because your feedback is very important for us and Miranda, certainly. And once again, Miranda, thank you so much. And certainly we can plan something on similar line. And thank you, Neeraj, for moderating this session, and hope to see you again all. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good rest of your day.